A historic event happens today. Anish Giri beats Magnus Carlsen and he himself called it one of the most important victories of his entire chess career. So let's take a look at this amazing game. Anish Giri plays as white and he started the game with d4, Magnus played knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, nothing special yet, and now Magnus plays b6. A little bit off the main lines here, but a completely playable Queen's Indian defense. Anish Giri played g3 and now bishop a6, that's the main move. Black is trying to attack this pawn and somehow create some difficulties for white, because this bishop wants to go to g2 and so he's not really capable of defending this pawn. Also the move e3 would be a really bad one because it's gonna create a lot of weaknesses on the light squares. That is why white plays queen c2, defending this pawn with a queen. It's one of the possible ways to go. b3 is also an alternative. And now bishop goes to b7. So basically black's idea is to provoke one of those moves and then go back trying to play in the center somehow. d5, c5, let's see what happened. Bishop g2 and Magnus plays c5, using the fact that the queen is no longer on d1, so it's not protecting the pawn on d4 anymore. So what's to do? If you just castle, then black takes and, well, exchange these bishops and have some ideas in the center. So Anish Giri just plays d5, sacrificing this pawn in the center in the very beginning and, well, trying to be as active as possible in this position. It's still a theoretical possibility, so both players knew that it's pretty possible, but still, at this point you can clearly see that this game is going into a very interesting direction. Knight takes d5 and now black is entirely a pawn up. They would be happy to play knight f6 back and d5, and then, well, basically the game would be pretty much over as black has an extra pawn. So white has to use this moment immediately and try to be as active as possible. First he plays castles, bishop e7, so black tries to finish the development, but here it comes. Rook d1, putting a lot of pressure on the black's position, not allowing this move knight to c6 because the knight on d5 would be hanging, and if the knight goes away, first of all you lose another tempo with the same piece, and you remember in the opening you should try to make only one move with one piece. That way you develop your pieces as fast as possible. And this knight has already made two moves, and now it's difficult not to move it the third time. Knight c6 played anyway because you can't really take it immediately because of knight to b4, and then would be a fork. Both the rook and the queen are hanging here, so Anish Giri plays queen f5. He still was in his book in this variation, and, well, I believe Magnus Carlsen, of course, he knew that these lines exist, but he was not that well prepared in this line. He was kind of bluffing. That's what Anish Giri said himself. So here Magnus played knight f6, a completely normal move, e4, it's still the main theoretical line in this variation, and white is trying to be as active as possible. This pawn is going forward to e5, and here the main move for black is g6, trying to push the queen away. Queen goes to f4 and then just castles, allowing this e5, the knight goes to h5, and very importantly, once again it happens with the tempo, and then the game continues. Black is a pawn up, but white has this tremendous compensation here thanks to the activity and more space. But instead, what happened in the game? Magnus played d6, and that's already not really a theoretical line, and, well, this position is slightly better for white. Anish just goes e5 anyway, ignoring the fact that this pawn is controlling this square, just trying to open up this diagonal, open up this file, using the fact that this pawn on d6 is pinned. Queen d7 has been played and Magnus goes into the endgame, but actually this endgame is not that pleasant for black. Let's see why. Queen takes d7, knight takes d7 and pawn takes d6. So white wins the pawn back, it's very important first of all, and then, well, this pawn on d6 is incredibly strong, and also black's king is still not castled, and so white's development is much better, the king is secure. Of course the queen side should still be developed, but white clearly has the initiative. Bishop goes to f6, rook e1 check, using this exact moment, because remember, if you have the initiative, you must use it, otherwise it's just gonna disappear. If you let black make a few moves, maybe just one move with the castles, there will be just nothing in terms of white's advantage. king f8, and now you see that the problem is this rook is closed, and that would cost black even more tempi to get it into the play somehow. And white tries to use this fact. Once again, development is always the key. Try to develop all of your pieces as fast as possible and as active as possible. Knight goes to b4. Magnus tries to play as active as possible himself too, creating this knight c2 fork here and making this knight very active, and the bishop is also now incredibly strong along this diagonal. But Anish says, I don't care about this fork, I just go forward and try to crush you, Magnus. So he plays this knight e5 move, boom, and here all of the pieces are hanging. This bishop on b7 is hanging, this knight on d7 is hanging, and it's so difficult to understand what's going on here. Magnus played knight takes e5, so if you take on g2, of course white is gonna take the knight on d7 first with a check, and afterwards he would be able to take this one back and would be completely winning. Also this knight could take another bishop also with a check. So that variation doesn't work. Magnus took on e5, but now bishop takes b7, and white has this two bishops advantage, and also this d6 pawn is still alive, and that is incredibly dangerous. Just rook d1, making sure that this pawn is protected, and also this fork is no longer a problem for white. Knight went to c4. Magnus tries to win this pawn anyway, but look, the main problem for black here is this rook on a8. It's not developed, it's not gonna be developed anytime soon, and so once white develops his pieces, it's like for the time being white is a rook up, and that's a tremendous advantage. So white plays d7, once again trying to be as active as possible, and also the pawn was under attack. Knight goes to c2, attacking the rook, rook b1, the only move, knight d4. So Magnus relocates his knight to be in the center of the board, incredibly active, and also this pawn on d7 once again a target. But b4 comes. Ignoring the fact that the pawn is hanging, just opening another file for this rook, and once again taking the advantage of the fact that the rook is not playing in the game completely. So once all of those pieces are going to be developed, like I said, it's just a rook up, so Giri goes for it. Rook takes d7 is actually a huge mistake, although that's definitely the most obvious move here, and let's see why Magnus blundered here. So now white plays bishop d5, it's a move with a tempo, and also opens up this b file a little bit. Next move, white also straightens, except not only this bishop takes e4, but also b takes c, and if you take back, you're gonna face a lot of problems along the b file. Knight goes to d6, and now Anish takes this pawn on c5, trying to open up this b file. B takes c, and bishop goes to a3. Of course, well, you have this b file, but you're not in a hurry to use it. If you play rook to b8 immediately, just rook to d8, you don't want to exchange the pieces in the position where you're much more active than your opponent. So bishop a3, once again, the development is the key. Now you could see that all of white pieces are developed, whereas black's rook is still not taking part in the game, and that is why white is winning in this game. King went to e7, finally trying to open up this rook, but unfortunately it's too late already. Bishop takes on c5, now winning this pawn back, and yeah, just look at those bishops. That is why they say that two bishops are greater than the bishop and the knight, because, well, it just blocks black's position completely. This knight is hanging, this knight is pinned, this king is still in the center, not secured, and so the white's position is much better here. Knight goes to e6. Magnus tries to stabilize it somehow, close to the king, and then maybe bring the rook over and hoping for the best. Bishop just goes to b4, and the problem is this knight is still pinned, so there are some potential ideas here. This bishop could be exchanged, and then another attacker is added to put even additional pressure on this knight on d6. Magnus plays a5, just trying to sacrifice the pawn, only to bring this rook into the game, and, well, trying to say that, okay, now I'm developed, you're a pawn up, but, well, I still try to hang on there. Knight goes to a4. Well, once again, Anish is trying to improve all of his pieces. This knight on c3, it's not really doing anything, and also it's of course under attack, so he tries to bring it to his attack. Knight d4 wouldn't be that great, because once again you don't want to exchange the pieces. Instead he plays knight a4 with the threat of knight b6, and the knight is, even though it's on the a file, which is usually not that great, but here it's very active, creating a lot of threats. Knight c4, trying to prevent this knight b6 idea, but now rook to c1, pinning this knight and creating a new problem for black, and it's just too difficult to handle everything. White is creating those threats with every move, the skin is still unstable, and look at white's skin, it has no problems whatsoever, so that advantage is tremendous, not to mention that white is still a pawn up here. Bishop goes to e5, now bishop b4 check, once again not allowing this king to just stay calm and enjoy the game. King went to f6, now knight c5, just forking here a lot of pieces, and the idea is that the knight on c4 is there, not protected, and after knight c5, rook takes c4, this knight on c5 is once again pinned, and that causes black a game, because after rook c7, white played bishop a5, attacking this rook, and there is basically no way to save this knight. For example, after rook a7, white could immediately play bishop b6 with a double attack, and then the knight is lost, and well, basically the game is lost. So that is why in this position Magnus just resigned. If you go to d7, let's say, then still bishop b6, and there is no way to save this knight. It can go anywhere because the rook is going to be lost, and if you do nothing, then the knight is going to be lost. If you try to defend it, then, well, once again, there are even more problems along this d file. Bishop will just go away. If you try to protect, then white will always find a way to create new threats, and well, eventually this pawn will be pushed and just go along this a file and crush black's position, because the knight is still pinned. You are basically polarized here. You have no possibility to move, and that's why Magnus resigned in this final position after bishop a5, and Anish Giri celebrates his victory. I hope you enjoyed this video. I was trying to explain it to you in the most instructive and hopefully fun way. Hit the like button if you found this video instructive. Subscribe to the channel if you want to get even more educational and entertaining content, and see you in the next video.